Hey everybody, welcome to this video. This is a must-see video to help you with the methods in context question, paper 1, question 5, and here I will give you some context that could be asked. Massive thank you for watching. Please click like or subscribe, but more importantly, give me a comment if you've got a question based on that methods in context, and I will get back to you. A quick reminder about what the methods in context is. It is worth 20 marks. You need to give strengths and weaknesses of a method, but you must apply it to the context in education. So some important points to consider, and the most important one is the top one. You need to consider the characteristics of the people, the group, the students, the teachers being studied, and how it may impact the research. So this is a massive amount that you've got to be doing. So the skill involved is quite high, but it also is very rewarding. So if you get this right, this can be one of the dead certain ways to achieve good marks on this paper. The research methods should be pretty familiar with you. For example, experiments, observation, documents, statistics, questionnaires and interviews. However, this question doesn't just want you to give the strengths and weaknesses, rather it wants you to apply it to a given context in education. So what context might they ask? Well, what is not always clear is the context that you could be asked. So I'm just going to go through a list of possible contexts that you could use to help prepare for what could be asked. And in the description, I've included a handout for you to print off. It has a copy of the context and space for you to make some notes to help prepare for this method in context. So here's the context that was given in 2018, observation to study pupil exclusions. Now pupil exclusions is much more than just being kicked out of school. It could be self-exclusion, switching off in class, being sent out of class, not turning up to class, or something that I see all the time, students asking to go to the toilet, self-exclusion. And how would you go about observing this? So to get you started, here is an example paragraph to just give you some ideas about how to apply to the context. So, practical problem is that the observation may take a long time to carry out. That's just about the method. So that would get you maybe level 2, possibly a level 3 if you clarified. For example, the student had joined an anti-school subculture that carries out actions likely to be kicked out of school, then it might take a long time for this to happen. It could take weeks or even years for somebody in an anti-school subculture to do something so bad to be kicked out of school for it. So basically what they're doing here, in the second part of the paragraph, is justifying the method issue, a long time to carry out. They've tried to apply it to the context with a characteristic, being anti-school and doing something so bad, that events like this might occur over a long period of time, which confirms the problem of observation being time-consuming. Another example that I want to share with you is in 2017. This was asking for field experiments to study teacher labelling. Now the thing is with field experiments, or just experiments in general, they often involve isolating variables to show cause and effect. And to get into context, you should be questioning, can you isolate all the variables in an experiment of teacher labelling in a school, especially if you want to measure the effect of that labelling on school achievement? So some students may suddenly get motivated to achieve. The parents might hire a private tutor to help with their studies. There are a range of reasons, and these are variables that are out of your control if you were a researcher. And this makes field experiments quite problematic to study in terms of teacher labelling. We don't know whether the independent variable has the desired effect or not. So here's another paragraph to help you along. So if a pupil is aware that they are being labelled, then it's unlikely that they will feel willing to take part in a field experiment. This is because they will feel embarrassed about their label. If their label causes them to misbehave or truant, there's the characteristic of the group, then they might be embarrassed to take part. The same for teachers. If they make judgments or stereotypical assumptions on working class or based on ethnicity, then they are less willing to participate because it's a sensitive subject. Yet, you may get many who are willing to take part because they are labelled positively, and no data regarding those who have a negative label, meaning that you cannot detect the real impact or effect of labelling on student achievements. So what I want to do now is just explore some other context, and please use your handout to have a go at practicing paragraphs for a range of the different scenarios. And if you want, you can send me an example paragraph. I could do some follow-up videos on this, on some of the scenarios that I've come up with. Documents to study marketisation. Now this could be a very interesting one, as you could explore this from a range of different angles. So for example, you could look at it from a school angle. How do schools market themselves? Give some examples. And then you could talk about how affluent schools would want to show off their website, their newspaper features, prospectuses, because they'll spend a lot of money on this marketing. So they'll be keen to take part in research, as this will put the school into a good light because of further marketing, and this will make them more attractive to parents. And then you could compare it to a poor school and whether you are actually capturing what you want to measure, basically. You could also look at it from the angle from parents as well. How do parents use this material? For example, working class parents may not use these documents such as prospectuses because they don't know how to, and they don't know how to do it to select a good school, and they don't know what they're looking for. So just a few examples that you could be considering if you've got a scenario like this. What about unstructured interviews to study parental attitudes towards education? Well, in this case, you could ask a range of people. You could ask teachers, and teachers, for example, might blame working class parents for poor attitudes, that they don't care rather than take responsibilities, and defer the blame. Parents, on the other hand, some might be really embarrassed, especially if they're poorly educated themselves and they can't help with the child's education. And it appears that they've got poor parental attitudes, and they might lie. Another example, you could be asked group interviews into why boys underachieve. Well, underachieving boys might be working class, and they might have values such as collectivism. So a group interview might involve a bit of peer pressure, and boys that might have slightly different views regarding their underachievement may be kept silent because they don't want to challenge the collective ideals. So start to consider some other factors that might influence why boys might underachieve, and whether you are going to capture that data from something such as a group interview. Unstructured interviews into applying to university. Well, you could consider comparing students, middle class and working class, different ethnic minorities, and what barriers might they pose. Because these might have characteristics that they have that might make an unstructured interview really difficult to find out whether or not they're applying to university. And something like an unstructured interview might be good if a student is speaking in more of a restricted code, because you can prompt them, you can explain your questions and basically get more data from them. Likewise, the time-consuming nature might mean that students that don't apply to university are not even going to take part in an unstructured interview either. Handed out questionnaires into subcultures such as pro-school and anti-school. Well, this could be really possible in a school because you have got a very captive audience. You've got potentially a large sample. You could get every teacher in a year group to hand out this questionnaire. But when you start to consider the groups that are being studied, such as pro-school and anti-school, you are bound to get different response rates and also responses as well. So start to think about what they might be and who is more likely to respond to research, which students are not likely, and how you're going to capture the data that you want. What about observations? So like in 2018, where you might be observing, so a classroom, a playground, staff rooms, would you get access to those, and why not? And what would happen if you do observe racism and sexism? What do you do with that knowledge? And will the gender and ethnicity of the observer influence the behaviour of those being observed, especially if it's about racism and sexism? Group interviews are really good for studying students. So if you're going to do a group interview about cultural capital, well, how are you going to measure it? What questions might you ask? And do you think that's going to be appropriate in a group setting? And why might students get embarrassed because of these questions that are being asked? A final one for you to consider is structured interviews to investigate the effect of material deprivation. Now, material deprivation is a sensitive topic. Asking students about what resources don't they have, their living conditions, the jobs of their parents, how much money that they earn, and things like that. So using a standardised interview of set questions, which even though is reliable, it's easy to replicate, might be problematic when studying material deprivation. So consider the characteristics of the students that are more likely to be materially deprived, and do you think that they will be honest if they're asked about it? And if they're asked about what little toys or resources that they have at home? And what about if they didn't know that they were materially deprived? And you start asking them about what do they have at home, do they have the internet, do they have a computer, and you start to prompt these ideas and they suddenly start to think, oh, hang on a minute, I don't have that. And that can impact their self-esteem and impact their educational achievement in the long run. So consider the long-term effects of the student, and on the parents and on the teachers that you are asking, the long-term effect on the research. So massive thank you for watching this video. You should have plenty of examples of scenarios that could be asked in a methods in context. Have a go at filling in the handout that I've produced for you as well, and massive thank you. And if you've not already done so, please click like, subscribe to me, leave a comment, and have a great evening. Bye.